Rusty Maggard, the pastor of the Redbridge United Methodist Church. Last week, I preached from this same chapter. Actually, last week we began the next 2 months. The sermons will all be based on the gospel lectionary reading for the day. The lectionary is a 3-year cycle of texts for preaching and worship and study. And the advantage to using a common lectionary is that it forces you to look at passages that are not of your choosing. And so there are several of those coming up in the next 2 weeks. They're hard passages. They're tough passages to unpack and understand. And I admire Joe Lynn for being able to read this passage because it's hard to read. It's hard to listen to. It's hard to comprehend what Jesus is saying here. Just last week, he was at a dinner party at the house of a Pharisee. Same dinner party. They're still there. And in this party, Jesus is teaching them about how status will be in the kingdom. That it won't be regarded as we commonly regard one another in this life. And he even says that the kingdom of heaven is like a great banquet where everybody's welcomed, everybody's invited. And it sounds good. His message is, we call good news, what Jesus has to say. It's good news, what Jesus has to say to us. And yet when we hear today's passage, it's almost like how it feels when you buy a used car. They tell you how great a deal it's going to be until you get into the finance office, and then you find out it's going to cost more. And this cost seems extraordinarily high. Which of you, Jesus says, if you're going to build a tower, doesn't first sit down and count the cost? Can you finish it? Do you have enough material? Do you have enough money? Or are you going to lay a foundation and get started and not be able to finish? Or are you going to build something that won't withstand the elements and ends up falling down so that you become a laughing stock? Or which of you, if you were a king going out to war with another king, wouldn't sit down and calculate whether or not you will be able to prevail? How much is this going to cost you? And if it's too much, won't go to the king and settle accounts and make peace with the other king? Now, commonly, we interpret these words of Jesus saying that to follow Jesus, we need to count what it's going to cost us. And we need to determine whether or not we're going to do this. And yet, as I think about it, I don't think that's what Jesus is saying at all. I think apart from Jesus, I'm not able to become the person that God calls us to be. Apart from Jesus, I'm not going to finish building this Christian life. No, I'm dependent on Jesus for forgiveness, for grace, for transforming life. For instance, who just builds a tower by themselves? Do builders do that? Or do they have people who help? Are there different trades involved in building that maybe you're not an expert in, so that you have to consult others? You know, what king goes to war with another king by themselves? No kings that I know of. No, they don't even go to the battles most of the time. They just command them. I think what Jesus is saying here, don't rely just on your own resources. Don't rely on just your own ability. Don't rely on simply your own understandings. Take what I give you. My resources are abundant and will enable you to live a life that is full and joyful in a life that God is calling you to. Come, follow me, and take the grace, and the love, and the power, and the presence that I want to give you in your life. But then he says, whoever comes to me and does not hate. Joe Lynn just read that and kept going. Does not hate father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Does this sound like Jesus? Whoever comes to me and does not hate cannot be my disciple. Hate's a strong word in the English language, isn't it? It's a negative, dark emotion, usually reserved, if you have it at all, in respect to people, people who are tormenting you, people who are vexing you, people who seem to have nothing else on their agenda than to inflict abuse and pain and discomfort on you. Or we use it in reference to maybe foods that we just can't stand. I hate beets. I actually like beets, but Kim just told me this week she doesn't like them. But that's how she said it. I don't like them. She didn't say I hate them, because that's even a strong word to use in reference to beets. But in Greek, while the word Jesus used is translated hate, the word he uses more closely relates to the word detachment. You know, we can be too attached to some relationships. We can be too attached to some people in life. We can be too attached to our ambitions in life. We can become so attached to our possessions that we no longer own them, they own us. This week, I had a birthday, and so Jacqueline called me, and perhaps I'm thinking about this because my youngest child has gone to college. And so I used the opportunity of her calling to tell me happy birthday to Fish for some information. How's it going? You're going to all your classes? You know the things that parents get to bed. Are you getting up? And I caught myself in a moment, and maybe too uncommon moment, of self-awareness, what I was doing. And so I apologized. I said, Jacqueline, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to tell you how to run your life. I'm not trying to micromanage you. You just need to know from me that I love you and I trust you. And I'm here. Most every one of us, not all of us, but most every one of us in this room have had the experience of having to say goodbye to someone dear. A father, a mother, a grandparent, a brother, a sister, a spouse. We know that they were near and dear to us because they sustained us, they supported us, they were cheering us on in this life. Yes, you can do it. And yet, we have to let them go. And there's a great cost in that, I think. I don't want to belittle that's very costly to risk loving in this life and to receive love in this life, because you and I are finite people. And one day, that day will come for those who you are dear to. You'll be gone. And they'll have to say goodbye. And your ambitions, they'll be over. All your possessions, stay here. You go on. You see, the Apostle Paul said it this way in the last verse of 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Now, faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love. I think what Jesus is telling us is don't be attached to non-eternal things. They're good. They're worthy. Many things are worthy and good, but aren't eternal. Faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love, because love is eternal. When all else fails, you are met by Christ, and Christ's love for you remains. Your faith is now sight. Your hope is now fulfilled. You are in the presence of God's love personified for us in the world in Jesus Christ. You have to be detached from the things that aren't eternal in order to be Christ's disciple. Let me give you some examples here. Jim and Eleanor Poindexter are members here. They've moved to Florida and living near their daughter down there. And when Jim was having surgery, their daughter came up, and I sat with her through the surgery. And she's a stranger to me, and I'm a stranger to her. And my experience of these things is we end up talking about strange things. And so one of those things that we talked about, she was sharing that she had retired in her 40s, was able to retire and move to Florida, where she bought the car of her dreams, a brand new Chevrolet Corvette. She'd always wanted one, but was saving her money and wanting to retire early, and now this was her moment to splurge. And another thing that she did in her retirement was that she began working as a volunteer in the local police department. And so one day, shortly after she had gotten her new car, new shiny Corvette, she drove it down to the police headquarters and into the parking lot. And it was a big lot. Most lots are bigger than they need to be. And so she made her way to the farthest back corner of the lot to park her baby. She turned it around and she backed it in and crossed two spaces so it would be fully protected back there. Maybe just exposed to the elements a bit, but yeah, so she walked across the lot. And just as she was getting to the building, she noticed an old man drive into the parking lot. Now, I don't know what she meant. That was her word, an old man. But when she said it, she was looking at me. And it made her nervous because it wasn't somebody she knew. It wasn't somebody who was an officer or somebody she knew that worked there. And then she noticed he wasn't parking close. He kept driving. And so then she turned around. She just stopped and turned around. And then with her mouth dropped wide open, she watched the old guy parked right up beside her car in the back of the parking lot. And then he got out and she heard a clunk. And she went running and screaming across the parking lot. What have you done? What are you doing? Can't you see I parked there to get a... What happened? And the old man came up, grabbed her hand and said, now, dear, if you can't afford a scratch, you can't afford the car. Sometimes we get too attached to the things we own, and they get more powerful in our lives than they need to be. Here's another, maybe a better example, actually. I have lots of good Christian friends, and I count you among them. People who have given their lives to Christ and are seeking to live transformed by His grace and witness to Him in the world and to His mercy, to live for justice, and you inspire me in countless ways. But many Christians, in addition to being followers of Christ, also live their lives by certain other principles. And often they're also connected to their understanding of biblical teaching or how to live justly as Jesus' disciple in the world today. So some of my friends have become not only followers of Christ with their lives, but as a result, that has led them to become vegetarians. Others of my friends, vegetarianism maybe where they started, but then they felt led to become a vegan. And while they're connected, the vegetarian-vegan thing is a principle. It's not a requirement, right? I hope not, because I've got a barbecue and a smoker at home. And, but I see how they reached that conclusion. I have other Christians, too, that because of Jesus' teaching, because of what they read in the Bible and how they interpret the Bible, they are pacifists. Or believe in nonviolence in human relationships. But they're Christians first. They're disciples of Jesus Christ first. They're children of God first, but they choose to witness to that, live that out through a principle of pacifism. And let me give you an example. Say one of my pacifist friends happens upon an adult who is abusing and severely beating an innocent child. Will they, because the principle they follow is pacifism, pass on by the other side and ignore the terror, the beating that an innocent child is receiving? Or will they not rather, because they follow Christ with their lives, not go to the aid and defense of the innocent child? Every one of them I know would go to the aid and defense of the innocent child, because that's who we're called to reach out for. Whatever you've done to the least of these, Jesus said, you have done it for me. So they would lay aside their principle of pacifism in order to protect Christ, in order to radically live for Christ, in protecting those he gave his life to find. Friends, as we build towers, let's remember, we don't build them alone. We don't even build them together. Nothing can be built unless it's built with Christ and in Christ and by Christ through us as we live our lives for him. Let us pray.